Polonians and friends, and welcome to our POSSE EDU webinar. I'm Dr. Gene Sokolowski, POSSE EDU president, and our topic is the Holocaust Industry's Shakedown of Poland. By way of quick background, we at POSSE EDU are a 501c3 nonprofit educational organization, and our mission is to educate the American public accurately on key aspects of Polish and Polish-American history, culture, and relevant current events. Our guest is Mr. Jan Peczkis, whom many of you know for his insightful analyses of over 1,800, let me repeat that, 1,800 works by Jewish, Polish, and other authors on historical as well as contemporary Polish-Jewish interrelations. Jan's analyses of the Holocaust literature in particular reveal significant falsifications, misrepresentations, and material omissions about Poland in the polls, which largely explains why Polish-Jewish relations remain problematic. So Jan, welcome, and thank you for being our guest speaker.
Welcome, yes.
Jan, for our viewers, go ahead, Jan, what's that?
Show the title, you should show the title slide.
Yeah, give me a second here. What I want to do is so once again, for our viewers, I wanted to point out that here on this slide, as you see, we have the two URLs that Jan has established, and they are both for his two highly informational websites. The first website is a comprehensive online database, as you see there. It's titled Jews and Poles Database. Jan's reviews are fully searchable, and they are searchable by keyword phrase identifiers as well as by author, book title, or year of publication. And his topic guide, it provides an extensive list of phrases, each of which direct viewers to the answers of many common questions related to Polish-Jewish relations. Now, the second URL you see there, it's his second website. It's titled Justice for Polish Victims of the Second World War, and it provides comprehensive information on this topic under various categories, and it does so in a visually oriented format. So our webinar procedure will be as follows. First, we'll show Jan's slide, and then I will pose a question to Jan about that slide, and then third, he will answer the question by discussing the slide in detail. So we'll go to the second slide and start there.
Okay, very good.
So Jan, you point out that the phrase Holocaust industry originated with Norman Finkelstein and his book, which is called The Holocaust Industry: Reflections on the Exploitation of Jewish Suffering. Finkelstein argues that the main danger to the historical record is not Holocaust deniers, but the prominent self-proclaimed guardians of the Holocaust memory. And he exposes the shakedown of European countries and demonstrates that the Holocaust industry has become an outright extortion racket. Finkelstein maintains that the Luxembourg Agreement between West Germany and Israel gave rise to the Holocaust industry. So if you would, please explain for us all of this in the next three slides.
Okay, absolutely. It all began when Israel found out that she can use her Holocaust anger to get money. The state of Israel was very angry at Germany right after the war, for obvious reasons for the Holocaust. And when the Germans paid them, they found out that Israeli anger was greatly lessened. The Jews got the idea, hey, we can make our anger over the Holocaust into a weapon that can force other nations, not just Germany, to pay us. See, the author notes this. The Third Reich certainly had given Israel cause to denounce Germany, and before the Luxembourg Reparations Agreement, Israeli officials freely made very damaging statements. But Israel did not bite the feeding hand. Why should they? After 1952, condemnations became little more than chiding, laying on the past more for advantage than for vengeance. That started it all. And then it was also a positive relation to the Jews in Israel too. Next slide. Okay, Jewish goodwill became something for sale, and it began right there. The cynical politician Ben-Gurion, in return for the bonanza of German cash indemnities, reparations, already paid Israel and still going strong, gave complete moral absolution to the German people. That was the birth of the de-Germanized Nazis, the false dichotomy between Nazis and Germans. And that's when the Jews started to soft pedal the Germans and their crimes, just call them Nazis. And that's when the Jews realized that their goodwill could be something for sale. Hey, if Germany can pay them not to be angry and to be positive towards them, like they were to Ben-Gurion, then Jews can also get other nations to pay them not to be angry at them and to have positive relations. And years later, Israel Singer of the WGC, World Jewish Congress, said Poland is to be publicly attacked and humiliated if she does not pay. That's pretty graphic. Fulfillment of this whole thing. Next. Okay, let us compare specifically how the Luxembourg Agreement led to the Holocaust industry. First of all, Germany did not, very important, Germany did not have to pay the Jews. She was any treaty obligations to pay the, she was not under any law that required her to pay the Jews. She did that over her own free will to repair the damage in a way for her reputation. Now, most Jews at the time were very strongly against any kind of reparations. They thought it was blood money, a vergilde, blood, long tradition of blood money, and that no amount of money could possibly pay for the 6 million Jews. So they got around that by saying, well, when Germans are not paying us for the 6 million Jews, that's impossible to do. What they are doing is paying us for the property of the German murdered Jews. See, unjust enrichment occurs when a murderer kills somebody and uses their property for its own use. In effect, he steals the property by killing the owner and taking the property for himself. And that's what Germany did with a lot of post-Jewish property. So the reparations were framed in terms of correcting this unjust enrichment. That's what happened. Now, Germany, of course, was defeated, disgraced, ruined, divided. Hitler was dead. Nazism was totally discredited. And so Germany needed to fix her reputation. That's why Germany paid the Jews. The only way that Germany is going to fix her reputation and atone for her shame is to voluntarily pay the Jews, even though she's under no treaty obligation or legal obligation to do so. This was framed in terms of coming to terms with the past. There's a long German word for that I'm not going to quote. And that's been used by Jews ever since, coming to terms with the past. Then Germany became an example to be used for his other name, how repentant she supposedly was because she paid the Jews. And we see that today, for example, left-wing groups say, why doesn't the United States pay for slavery or for taking the land from the Indians the way Germany has repented? Why doesn't the U.S. repent for her wrongs the way Germany did for hers? Now, this is how it transferred to the Holocaust industry. The Jews found they could be paid hefty money even though they're not legally owed to do so by Germany. So, well, why limit ourselves to Germany? If we can blame other nations for the Holocaust in some way, we can also be paid by these nations, even though we have no legal basis for being paid. We can just declare it and make a political issue out of it, like Germany did, and get paid even though we're not owed by law. Then again, the idea was partly to blame them for the Holocaust, and partly was, again, this unjust enrichment argument. The argument being that these European nations, notably Poland, got a lot of property from the Jews who were killed, and they were profiting from it. They were beneficiaries of the murder. Now, this, of course, is totally false. The murderer engages in unjust enrichment when he takes the property of the murder victim and uses it for his own purposes. if you get the property of a murder victim, totally, you're not connected with the murder, you got it totally legally, there is no unjust enrichment. Think about it. If it was not so, anything you ever own that once belonged to a murder victim would make you culpable. You'd be obligated to pay the family of the murder victim or some self-appointed organization saying that you owe them some money, something like that. But that isn't so. You're not the murderer. You got the property legally. The property is completely yours. There's no more connection to the murder victim. It's just as if the property always was yours from the beginning. There is no unjust enrichment in such a case, but the Jews are trying to fool the world's people into thinking that there is the merely owning Jewish property while not being the murderer, Germans and Austrians, is unjust enrichment. And so the Jews are owed. It is not unjust enrichment, and the Jews are not owed. And there's the question of reputation. If the Jews can put the blame for the Holocaust on other nations, they can. If they can put the blame for the Holocaust on other nations, they can accuse them of needing to atone for it, to do something about it. Okay, they need to fix their reputation. They have to. They're ashamed. They have to be ashamed of something. This is called the pedagogika wstydu, which Poles call it. More on this later. And to come to terms with the past, just like Germany has come to terms with the past. She paid the Jews, so also the other nations that are accused must also come to terms with the past. Very convenient, and to pay the Jews the same way. That's the whole idea. Of course, Jews never ever come to terms with the past for the crimes they have committed against other people, but that's another story. Then Germany was made an example of a nation that atoned for the Holocaust and paid because she paid the Jews. And now it's up to the other nations to follow Germany's example and also pay the Jews for the Holocaust, even if their involvement in it was minimal or non-existent, and even just for inheriting Jewish property, which they got, which was perfectly legal to begin with. Let's look at this more closely. Okay, next slide.
With the Holocaust industry now focusing on Poland, what were the tactics it used trying to convince the international community that Poland must pay reparations to Jews for the crimes committed by the German Third Reich?
Okay, you see, it's been decades of a one constant smear campaign. That's the idea. This is extortion. It's like somebody comes to your business and says, if you don't pay us reparations money, your business may well go up in flames. So the same kind of blackmail, extortion, it's moral blackmail. If you do not pay us, we will ruin your international reputation. And that's what Jews have been doing for Poland for the last 40 years or so. Israel Singer again said at World Jewish Congress in 1996, Poland will be publicly attacked and humiliated if she does not pay. But forget Singer, though. This is standard operating procedure that started long before Singer and continues long after that. That's why in the media, we have all these lies about Polish death camps, or failing that, some kind of Polish permission, the Poles had to give some kind of permission to the Germans to set up the death camps under seal. Laughably preposterous, but too many dumb people will believe it, and the Jews know it, and that's why they repeat this lie. All kinds of insinuation about Polish Nazis, no such thing. And then there's a favorite one we hear all the time, Polish complicity in the Holocaust. It's a very convenient term because it doesn't mean anything. Nobody ever defined what complicity is. What does complicity mean? 1% of the population participating in the Holocaust, 1/10 of a percent, 100th of a percent, who knows? It's never been defined, so it's an absolute false accusatory statement. It's an emotional statement, an emotional accusation, a buzzword. That's exactly what it is. And failing that, the Jews said, well, maybe the Poles didn't exactly kill the Jews to a significant extent, but they were very mighty happy that the Germans did dirty work for them. That way, Poles could get rid of their Jews without getting their hands dirty in blood. Okay, that's the insinuation that many Jews make. In fact, in the movie Schindler's List, Schindler's List, there's a scene of a group of Poles grabbing globs of mud and throwing it at the Jews that were escorted by the Germans to be led to their death. And a Polish girl is shouting, "Goodbye, Jews! Goodbye, Jews!" That is a lie. This lie has been seen by hundreds of millions of people. Schindler's List has been seen by about 400 million people. Now, so well, it's just a little statement, who cares? It's only 15 seconds. Nobody's going to notice it. Oh, yeah? An advertiser would buy a 15-second spot seen by 400 million, would pay big money just for a 15-second spot with an audience of 400 million people. Yes, ideas have consequences. Ideas shape people's minds. People's minds are shaped by what's this anti-Polish garbage, and it's all over the place, seen by hundreds of millions of people. But then a little to the left, when all else fails, they get the same old thing. Poles got rich off dead Jews, which is a total lie. Poles got these properties completely legally. They're not connected to the German murderers in any way. The Germans did the unjust enrichment. The Germans murdered the Jews. The Germans took the Jewish property. All these Jewish properties became the property of the Third Reich. The only reason why the Germans did not succeed in unjust enrichment was because the Red Army drove the Germans out of Poland, and that's how eventually Poland legally and properly got the property that used to belong to Jews. So Poles did not get rich off dead Jews. The Germans, if anything, got rich off the dead Jews, and the Germans, by circumstances, the power of the Red Army, were forced to give up their gains, and eventually Poland got everything legally. There's even more. A survey has recently come out, Israeli Jewish public opinion. Israelis think that Poles are as guilty as the Germans. Almost half of Israelis think that Poles are as guilty as the Germans, and another quarter think that they're not as guilty, but they are largely responsible also for the Holocaust. To find this article, it's too long to put the URL here. I took, put in the exact words, France seen as more, and one of the first entries that come, an exact phrase like that, in times of Israel. So you see what this is. This is amazing. Here are the Germans are the ones that killed the 6 million Jews, and the Israeli Jews have the audacity, almost half of them, to say that Poland is as guilty of how many millions of Jews did the Poles kill? Not at all. And that's how it is. However, there may be a bit of karmic justice here. There's been a propaganda campaign from some circles equating Israel's treatment Gaza, Israel with Nazi Germany, the way they're acting. So all these decades, the Jews have been dumping on Poland, equating her with Nazi Germany, and now the Jews get a taste of their own medicine with Israel being equated with Nazi Germany. It's called Holocaust inversion. They have a term where the Jews and the Nazis switch places. So that's how it is. Now, all this is for the purpose of shaming Poland into paying off the money from the Holocaust industry. Okay, shaming is a very powerful political weapon. Again, the Poles call it the pedagogika wstydu, the pedagogy of shame. This used to be, for example, under communism, they could accuse anybody of committing, say, a class crime or a crime against the people. And the only way for you to shed this, to atone for it, not by trying to fight it, or you had to admit it, you had to do penance, you had to abase yourself, you had to own the shame. In effect, you had to carry a scarlet letter showing the shame that you feel for what you are guilty of. And then maybe the communists would eventually let you. That's one pedagogika wstydu. In US history in recent years, we have all this talk trying to blame white people for slavery. American history classes have been tailored to show nothing much happened in American history except slavery. And so white people need to have shame instilled to them so they're willing to pay slavery reparations and other things like these presumed privileges that white people are supposed to have. Okay, that's another exercise of the pedagogika wstydu. And if they don't admit they're wrong, that only proves that they're racist and they are in denial. Okay, that's how it is. Now with the Jews, it's the same thing. The whole thing is to shame Poland Poles into thinking they are guilty for the Holocaust or this or that, and so they will pay the Holocaust industry. If not, create an international opinion that Poles are bad people. Poles are as bad as Nazi Germany. In fact, Nazi Germany had to pay the Jews, so Poles are just as bad. They also need to pay the Jews. The pedagogika wstydu. Fooey. Okay, next.
Well, Jan, you point out that the Holocaust industry accuses Poles of unjust enrichment off Jewish properties. However, as you point out, in 1949, Israelis did, in fact, unjustly enrich themselves off Palestinians. So in the next two slides, explain for us what actually occurred and how Israeli leadership reacted.
All right, once the facts are, these Jewish claims about, false claims about unjust enrichment by Poland, they're based on partly on owning a moral high ground, that they lost so much property. Poland must be guilty in some way because she got all this property, which is false, but it's also ironic because Jews are the ones that are guilty big time of unjust enrichment. When Israel, again, I'm not questioning Israel's right to exist. I believe that the Jewish people have a right to their homeland, just like Poles do and every other people do. But how it was obtained is something else. This author, Tom Segev, wrote, "The only thing that surprised me," said David Ben-Gurion at a cabinet meeting, "and surprised me bitterly, was the discovery of such moral failings among us, which I had never suspected. I mean, the mass robbery in which all parts of the population participated. Soldiers who entered abandoned houses in the towns and villages they occupied, grabbed whatever they could. Some took the stuff for themselves, others for the boys or for the kibbutz. They stole household effects, cash, heavy equipment, trucks, and whole flocks of cattle." Classic unjust enrichment. And the Jews made it worse because they created laws that legitimately kept the stolen property, and they created laws after the fact to legitimize this stolen property and their unjust enrichment of the Palestinians. Okay, next. Okay, this is real unjust enrichment. Jews got rich off Palestinians, not Poles off Jews. Let's read how this became legitimized, and Jews stayed with the stolen property from the Palestinians. Israel began seizing Arab property by force in an arbitrary fashion during the 1948 war, and quickly followed these seizures by creating a legal regime that transferred Arab land to institutions controlled by Jews. Israel's nascent government attempted to retroactively legitimize its actions and facilitate further seizures and transfers through legislation enacted during the first 5 years of Israel's existence. Land that had been held by Arabs came to be owned and controlled by Jews, and mainly for the benefit of Jews. So when the Jews accuse Poles of being unjust, at best they are the pot calling the kettle black. But the kettle, the Poles are not black because they legally got the property. They did not steal the property from the Jews, the Germans did. The Poles are not doing unjust enrichment. Jews very definitely and egregiously are doing unjust enrichment. Now, nothing's going to change until we put a stop to the Holocaust industry. What I propose, if we could do it, a new law, a new international law, the Jews can make no claims from any other people about stolen property or unjust enrichment connected with the Holocaust, unless and until they fully pay the Palestinians for all the stolen property, the stolen lands, and the unjust enrichment. Until then, Poland should not listen to any claims whatsoever from the Holocaust industry, even if they were legitimate in some way. Totally should not until Israel fully pays all the property she has stolen from the Palestinians. Again, this should be an international law, and this should cut the Holocaust industry off right, nip it right at the bud. Okay, next.
Now, Jan, as you point out, the Holocaust industry is determined to extract as much money as it can from countries that they've targeted for extortion, and it has employed a number of tactics to force payments through litigation, intimidation, and even governmental duress. Now, in the next 3 slides, explain for us the various methods that the Holocaust industry had used to coerce these payments and the countries that they targeted.
Okay, let us first consider the Swiss bank's case. The Jews raised a big stink, like I do about Poland, raised a big stink about the Swiss collaborating with Nazi Germany, being secretly on the side of of profiting from the Jews, and worst of all, hiding money it had taken from the Jews. So the Jews had filed a class action lawsuit against the Swiss, because knowing that they don't have to prove that their accusations are true, they can manipulate things to their advantage and force the Swiss to pay without ever needing to prove that the Swiss ever did anything wrong. See, it says the lawyers for that class can bring enormous pressure to bear on the defendant to settle, meaning to pay ransom without ever going through that. Excellent choice of words, pay ransom. That's what Norman Finkelstein said, called it a racket. He gave the analogy of the Holocaust industry being a group of pirates that are circling the waters looking for booty. I prefer a different analogy. I prefer the one about the Holocaust industry being a bunch of vultures that are sitting in the branches waiting till the nation is weak and circling over and deciding when and where they'll pounce on a certain nation. They are vultures. And this is what happened to the Swiss. In addition, there's the adverse publicity created by tearful victims and the process of discovery. Media manipulation. The media will side with the Jews, not with the Swiss. And so the Jews can create a media circus about those horrible Jewish victims and how the nefarious Swiss were hiding the money that rightfully belongs to the Jews and all that. But the real hammer is that public officials take the presence of the class action suits they themselves are generating or backing as an excuse to act as if the plaintiff's accusations had been proven. These class action lawsuits create a climate that a person is guilty unless proven innocent. There must be something to these charges, or else there would be no class action lawsuit. Assumed to be their assumption of guilt, and the media keeps it up on the side of the Jews. Again, the truth of the The truth of the accusations is immaterial, above all because those who bring the suits have every intention of preventing them from coming to trial before a jury. Exactly right. The Jews are not trying to prove that the Swiss actually did any of these things. They're sitting on Jewish money and better are hiding it from the Jews from rightfully reclaiming it. No, they're trying to intimidate them into paying. Again, this is blackmail and paying ransom. It's not about proving truth. It's about extorting money which the Jews are not owed, but they pretend that they're owed, and they put pressure on the nations to pay them, as happens. Okay, next. Okay, let's take this further. This is really revealing. Blackmail, pay tribute to the Holocaust industry or else, like pay the gang protection money or they will burn your business down. Particularly irksome in the view of these commentators is that none of the Holocaust restitution cases have ultimately been resolved on the merits of the case. That says it all. In the end, the defendants simply calculated that it was cheaper to settle than to continue. Owen Pell, a counsel for the defendants, noted this client simply had drawn the obvious conclusion. Companies have learned that you don't judge a loose lawsuit by its merits. You judge it by the potential public relations damage. And that's it. The Jews are using blackmail, moral blackmail, threatening and actually damaging the public relations of a company or a nation by filing these suits until those nations pay. That's why they're slandering Poland, accusing her of being complicit with the Holocaust and all this garbage they've been saying for over 40 years. In order, so Poland cries uncle and hopefully pays the Jews, so that the Jews stop slandering Poland, ruining Poland's reputation, or failing that, till enough nations and international politicians side with the Jews and force Poland to pay the Jews. This is especially so if Poland was in a weak situation, just like the vultures circling overhead and waiting until the target is weak. Something's wrong, like it's trapped in a bush or something, and then the vulture swoops down and does those works. The Holocaust industry are vultures. They're waiting for the proper time. When a nation is weak, to target an attacker, extortion, public relations damage. Exactly right. Okay. Next. Okay, this is I read several books by Michael Baziller, author Michael Baziller. He's a Jewish attorney who was involved in this Holocaust industry litigation for the Jews. He knows what he's talking about. Consider now, let's forget the Swiss, the French. Somehow the French, the railroads were used to transport Jews eventually to Auschwitz. France was under partial occupation, the Vichy regime. Now, I don't know how France got blamed for her railroads being used when she was under German occupation. Doesn't matter how. If the Jews are successful in blaming somebody, that's what counts. It doesn't matter what actually happened. What matters is what the Jews say happened, and they can control the narrative and get people to believe that and to follow it. All right, so Baziller, the attorney, writes, the class action litigation, though unsuccessful, was the loud knock on the door that brought the issue of SNCF's French railroads' role in the Holocaust into the front. The media kept the issue alive by producing stories on the subject. Okay, so you see, even though the class litigation did not work this time, the Jews have other tricks up their sleeves. Now, I'm not saying that the Jews will use class actions against Poland. I'm saying, remember, Jews are very intelligent. They have international connections. They know what they're doing, and they know how to get things done. They know how to exploit people and take advantage of them. Okay, so loud knock on the media kept the issue alive. All right, the media again sided with the Jews. Instead of scorning and castigating the Jews for blaming people for something that they did not do, instead of scorning them for not proving that the French voluntarily did anything wrong to the Jews, instead they took the side of the Jews and assumed it was so. Well, there's more than that. See, the winning push came from American legislators. The introduction of bills in the Maryland legislature barring any company involved in the wartime deportation of Jews from being awarded government contracts appears to be the main impetus for the French government wanting to settle the claims. In other words, the French were bullied into giving the Jews what they want. Again, just like with the Swiss, the Jews never had to prove that the French ever did anything wrong to them. They just had to declare it, raise enough of a big stink, and put political pressure, and they got it. The class action lawsuit didn't work. The media attention didn't work. The winning push came from American legislature. I don't know how the Jews got American legislators involved in disputes between Jews in European countries, Jews in Switzerland, Jews in France, and now Jews in Poland, but they did. It's part of their international connection and their big toolbox of techniques they can use to intimidate people to pay them. Okay, Jewish power using American legislatures to force the issue to their advantage. Now, I've done some reading. After the French paid, Holland paid too, but Belgium didn't. Well, Belgium just offered an apology. Of course, the Jews don't want apologies. They want to be paid. And so the Jews raised a big stink. They howled, something like, well, why aren't you Belgians? Why don't you come to terms with the past? The French came to terms, the Germans came to terms with the past, the French came to terms with the past, the Dutch came to terms with the past. Why on earth won't you come and come to terms with the past and pay us? And they say the same thing basically about Poland. So, and something else, this is priceless. There's some elderly Holocaust survivors in Belgium, and the Jews raised a big claim on sympathy and manipulation that why won't Belgium pay these Holocaust survivors so they have a little money before they pass on? That is a cynical lie. From the beginning, when Jews got reparations from Germany, most of the Germans wanted some of that money to go Holocaust survivors, right beginning in 1952. But no, most of the money went to the state of Israel. and relatively little Holocaust survivors. That's one thing that turned Norman Finkelstein against the Holocaust industry. His mother is a Holocaust survivor, and she got only a little bit of money. Most of the money went to Jewish organizations or the state of Israel claiming responsibility for Holocaust survivors. Holocaust survivors themselves got very little. So now we have all these poor Holocaust survivors that should have been rich a long time ago. They're in Belgium, even in the state of Israel. And and the Jews have the audacity of claiming the needs of Holocaust survivors when it was the Jews that decades ago did not pay Holocaust survivors. In fact, they don't even need reparations. Norman Finkelstein pointed out if Holocaust survivors, the needs of Holocaust survivors was the real issue, one wealthy Jew could pay all of them out of his own pocket and not even feel it, okay? So just simply poor Holocaust survivors is simply an emotional manipulation, a lie, a propaganda action, manipulating emotions, playing on emotions, a kind of an emotional bait. And that's what happens with the Holocaust industry. That's what they're like, because most people don't know what's going on. And they know they can take advantage of it. Okay, next.
Well, yeah, now you point out that Holocaust industry Jews claim that Poles prevented them from reacquiring their property, meaning their Jewish property. And so if you would describe for us the arguments that are used to portray Poles as, if you will, property blockers, and why these arguments are invalid.
Okay, the same thing with the Swiss. The argument that the Swiss are sitting on big money that rightfully belongs to the Jews, and the Swiss are preventing the Jews from reacquiring the property, the monies that are rightfully there. That's a lie. And the same thing is true with Poland. For example, we have a lot of books say that after the war, Poles killed Jews that came to get their property back. Even better, the Mouse, the cartoon series seen by impressionable children, shows a Jew being hanged. Jew king comes to get back his property, and the new Polish owner is there, and the Polish owner hangs the Jew. Impressionable children get to see that lie. Wait, but lie, didn't this really happen? Yes, it did, but it's not very trivial. What the Jews have done is take some tiny incidents, blown them way out of proportion, made big mountains out of tiny molehills, and cropped everything else out and prevented that as being fact. Here's what happened. Yes, after the war, there was several hundred Jews who were killed by Poles. Some of them, well, we don't know how many of these were anti-Semitic, how many were not. There was a widespread breakdown of society, demoralization caused by years of German occupation and a communist takeover. A lot of Poles resorted to crime, lots of other Poles were killed too. So we don't know how many were killed because they were Jews and how many were just simply killed because they were just because they were there, just like Poles who were murdered by other Poles. In some cases, yes, when the Jewish owner came back alive, the Poles killed him. But that was only a few hundred cases at most. And this was not just a fit of jealousy or anger. The Poles had lost lots of their own property during World War II. Warsaw was in ruins. A lot of other cities were in ruins. Think about it. You lost your property. You got a hold of some post-Jewish property you thought was post-Jewish. You're a squatter. Eventually, you will get this property by hanging on to it when enough time passes. And then the Jewish owner unexpectedly comes back alive to claim it. Would you be happy? I wouldn't be. So in some cases, it did lead to murder. And of course, there's no avoiding the fact Jews were murdering thousands of Poles while Jews were collaborating with a communist takeover of Poland. And without doubt, there was some animosities there, some desire for revenge. Not as much as the Ukrainians or the Lithuanians did when thousands of local police took part in the killings of Jews alongside the Germans, but it doesn't mean that Poles were totally free of such justified anger for Jewish-Soviet collaboration. However, again, perspective, this happened only in a few hundred times against about 200,000 Jews who came back, claimed their property, and usually sold it and went back and moved to Palestine, which soon became the state of Israel. So in the vast majority of cases, no such thing happened. And yet that's what the propaganda shows. The Holocaust books only talk about tiny number of cases where Poles did kill Jews, and Maus, with its lie shown to impressionable children, shows a Jew claiming this public claims property and being hanged by the Poles. And that's what impressionable children get to see. Then there's other excuses for the Jews keep raising a stink, saying, well, those claims weren't valid because Jews were not given enough time. That's bunk. Jews then did complain that they were not given enough time. They were given a 1 year of extension to the end of 1948. So we had 4 years to reclaim the property. Everybody was treated in the same way. I mean, anybody can make this claim. Oh, we didn't get enough time. 10 years, 20 years, that would not be enough time. That's bunk. Any lawyer worth his salt will say somebody, oh, my client was unfairly treated. My client didn't get enough time. Blah, blah, blah. Bunk. Okay. And Jews even today say, oh, we're still being picked on this or that or that. Well, the Jews then didn't have lawyers. Well, guess what? The Gentile Polish claimants didn't have lawyers either. So see the farce of the whole thing, how the Jews are bending over backwards to slander the Poles and blame them falsely for hanging on to Jewish property. Yeah, it's obvious. Okay, next.
We know that Poland has, in fact, acted responsibly in returning unused Jewish communal properties, despite the fact that the Holocaust Industries continues to accuse the Poles of property theft. So what arguments has it used to criticize Polish good faith efforts, and what did Jews often do, I should say, after acquiring the communal properties?
Okay, communal properties are things like cemeteries, synagogues, and mikveh, which are ritual bathhouses. Now, first thing to realize in such a case, such properties, they don't follow ethnicities, they follow circumstances. Abandoned property does not follow ethnicity. Now, abandoned, unfortunate choice of words. Abandoned makes it seem like the owner relinquished or dropped his property, relinquished his property. No, it doesn't have to be that. What abandoned means when the owner will no longer be capable of using his property, then it's considered abandoned. For example, when Stalin seized Poland's eastern half and annexed all the Polish properties there, including my grandfather's oil well, and all the communal properties, the churches, the Polish cemeteries, they automatically became the property by legal fiat of the Soviet Union, which then apportioned it according to its will. In some cases, a few Poles were left in this at the discretion of the Soviet authorities. A few of the cemeteries came back to the few Poles who still remained. Otherwise, the Soviets were the owners, and they did whatever they wanted with it, and they did. They tore some of them down. They turned some churches into storage houses. They converted them to Ukrainian churches. Any number of things. Cemeteries were mostly neglected. Some were converted into playing fields and things like that. The Soviets acted completely legally based on legal fiat that these territories were taken from Poland and transferred to the Soviet Union. The same as with territories that Poland got from Germany. All the German churches, the German cemeteries became the property of the Poles to do as they want. The Poles eventually took apart all the German cemeteries and used the rocks in order, the headstones, in order to use as building material. Now, Jews go around showing a lot of the matziva, the tombstones of Jewish cemeteries, how bad, how barbaric the Poles were. They used them for building roads, for paving streets, and for building buildings. The Poles did something horrible. It is not. Even in peacetime, cemeteries are not eternal. And after a certain amount of time, the cemeteries are not used. The building with the materials, cemetery materials, including the headstones, can be reused for other purposes. It's completely legal. But of course, with the Jewish propaganda taking advantage of the gullibility of the people, portray Poles as some kind of monsters that took Jewish cemeteries and used the matziva, the headstones, for building, for paving, and things like that. Poles did nothing wrong. This completely the Jews have abandoned these properties because they're no longer alive. That's why they're abandoned. Poland can do with them whatever. Now, again, there are exceptions. The small number of Jews who remained in Poland alive, they did get back a few of their cemeteries and synagogues. But in the vast majority of cases, there was no Jews left. They automatically paid transfer to the Polish state to do what they want, and usually they were neglected. The synagogues fell apart. The cemeteries were overgrown with weeds and grazing and all that stuff. And that was done. It was completely illegal and no different from what happened to the German cemeteries and the recovered territories or the Polish cemeteries, the territories that were taken, confiscated by the Soviet Union. Ironic to all these Jewish complaints, if Poles were to preserve all these cemeteries and synagogues, Germany would have to be the one paying maintenance. Imagine that. Oh, please put it back. Please put it back.
A second. I'm not sure
Okay.
what happened here. I do apologize.
That's okay. It happens.
Here we go.
Okay,
I
back.
do apologize. Something happened. It's let's get it back.
That one, the green one. Yeah.
I
Okay, good.
apologize.
Stop. All right, yeah, that's right. And so Germany would have to pay for thousands of unused synagogues, pay for their maintenance and their existence, and pay for thousands of unused cemeteries as a perpetual memorial and atonement to the 3 million Polish Jews that the Germans killed. Now, otherwise, it's absurd to think that today's surviving Jews are owed all these things. Norman Finkelstein put it well. Imagine 6,000 surviving Jews get 6,000 synagogues. Each Jew gets his own synagogue. Nonsense. With few exceptions, the synagogues have become now belong to Poland. Only a handful of cases really actually remain in Jewish hands. It's completely proper and normal. In 1997, Poland did a slight concession. She offered to return some of these to the local Jews. That itself has been disputed, that there's any valid connection between today's Jews and the Jews of 80 years ago. Just because the same religion does not necessarily establish the collective. She did. The idea being they have to prove that they need these cemeteries, individual cases, and to get them, okay? But what did the Jews do? All the time were saying these are sacred Jewish properties. How can Poles be such a heels to reuse Jewish cemeteries, matziva, the headstones for roads and paving and all that stuff? And guess what the Jews did? They didn't use these. They sold them. Here they were saying all along, all these Jewish properties were so sacred, and yet they sold them for money, and then they were ruined, and that's all. So it's a total cynical lie from beginning to end. Okay, next. Okay,
On
let's
with
talk.
the Terezin
Sorry.
Declaration, Jews still pretend that they are owed, even though they are not, and they still pretend that Poland owes them something, again, even though she does not. Explain for us what the Terezin Declaration is and how it conjures up special rights, even though they have no basis in fact.
Okay, in 2009, there was a meeting in Terezin in Czechoslovakia, where various nations just informally talked about Jewish stuff and how general ideas about how restitution was to be done. No firm commitments was made. No monies were so Polish politicians say, well, Terezin Declaration, it's nothing. It doesn't obligate Poland to do anything. Others say, yes, it does. The Jews will twist the Terezin Declaration into making it something that does make Poland obligated to pay them. That was the whole idea. It's a foothold. It's a trap. And the Jews control the narrative. If they can persuade enough politicians that Terezin does require Poles to pay, then that's what will happen. It doesn't matter what the Terezin Declaration says. Okay, and let's look at this recent paper came out by Omri Levin. Omri Levin is an Israeli Jew, a member of the Israeli Bar Association. He is a lawyer who specializes in Polish restitution cases. And he said just said directly, the Terezin Declaration is not an internationally legal binding treaty. Yes, he confirms it. It does not have legal standing, but it has another purpose. Otherwise, Jews would not be pushing for it. Why would they be pushing for such a declaration if it had no power? They'd be wasting their time, wasting their money. They don't do that. There's a reason for it. And sure enough, it can also be read as a recognition that blah, blah, blah. I like that. Good words. Can be read. It doesn't say it, but it can be read that way. And going a step further, Jews can enforce the narrative, enforce this misunderstanding of the declaration to try to make Poland pay. It's a foothold that they have and they want to use it. Read as a recognition that although Jews and non-Jews alike suffered under Nazism and communism, He spelled it with a small c like many people do. I changed it to a capital C as it should be. And double persecution targeting of Jews, as well as the fact that most Polish Jews and their descendants do not live in Poland anymore, separates the Jewish claims from other claims. Bunk. There's no such thing. You're just imputing something to the Terezin declaration that it does not have. It doesn't have any legally binding stand as it, but the Jews can make it that way, and that's why they pushed it, and Poles were dumb enough to agree to it. Okay, next.
Is our last slide. Despite the fact that Western law requires heirless properties to revert to the state, the Holocaust industry would have us believe that Jews would be exempt, or they should be exempt from such property succession laws. So in what ways do the Holocaust industry Jews claim special rights to properties that were once owned by Jews who died at the hands of Germans, but now, of course, have no legal heirs?
Okay, first of all, as I said, any heirless property by default teach to the state. Doesn't matter how it happened. If there was no heirs that were born, whether an entire family died in a catastrophe, like say a fire, or the entire family was murdered, it doesn't matter. If there are no heirs, the property goes to the state. So it doesn't matter how few or how many Jews were murdered by the Germans. By default, it goes to Poland. Jews have no legal basis whatsoever for claiming any right to these heirless properties, but they try. Here's what they do. They manipulate and they lie. They make up tribal rights. Now, that's saying that these are higher rights. These are tribal rights. Now, they're not literally claiming tribal rights, but they're acting as if they had tribal rights. So they had rights to these properties simply because they are Jews and these properties were once owned by Jews. The irony of it was, were it true, all the other genocides are heirless. All the other genocides, they also would have tribal rights, those who experience genocide. But of course, they don't. The Jews are creating de novo special right in the imagination of the politicians in order so that they can force Poland to pay them for property that Poles legally owe and Jews have no claim to. There's also the problem that's an ex post facto consideration. The Jews are trying to make this retroactive going back 80 years. That's another problem that they'd have to, but they don't matter. If they can convince enough politicians that they have these tribal rights, even though they don't, that Poland owes them, even though Poland doesn't, then yes, that they'll be able to force Poland to pay. There's a further irony. If somebody had to pay for these heirless properties at all, it would be the Germans. It's because of the Germans that these are heirless property. It's because of the Germans that these Jews are dead. And it's because of the Germans that no heirs were left, because the Germans killed them all. That's what genocide does. It kills the original property owners and it also kills the heirs. The Germans are the cause of that. So Germany would have to pay, but no, they're trying to make Poland pay. Now, communists came to power. They were imposed by the Soviet Union, agreed by Britain and America in the betrayals at Tehran and Yalta. The communists nationalized the properties and Poles had nothing to say about that. And so, again, they would have to go to the communists, their successors, or to the British and Americans because of Tehran and Yalta and try to get regress from that. Because Poland had no choice. The communists came to power and said, well, Jews said, well, they were ethnic Poles. So what, they were ethnic Poles? They're not doing the will of the Polish people. They're imposed by an outside force, Moscow, and doing the Soviet will, not the Polish will. Okay, now, Terezin Declaration again. It's not just a general idea. It's backed by government pressure. I talked about American government being involved in supporting, getting manipulated for I don't know how to support Jewish claims against the French, against the Swiss, and now also against the Poles. S-447 U.S. Congress voted, monitored compliance with the Terezin Declaration and progress that Poland is supposed to be making towards paying restitution. Again, no specific monies are claimed or made. It's just simply a show of political pressure to put on Poland to force her to pay. What's even better is that some Jews have suggested that Poland take out a huge loan to pay this and gradually over generations pay what it owes to Jews. That's a return of the Jewish usurer. That would mean Poland would be under complete control of the Jews, these Jewish usurers who are keeping Poland in bondage to them. That's the whole idea. It was one of the Rothschilds supposedly said, give me control of a nation's finance, and I don't care who makes its laws. So that's the case. If the Jews have financial control of Poland, this goes back to a situation that existed for centuries. The Jews are the real rulers of Poland because they have economic power over Poland, and economic power is more important than political power. Poland then becomes a vassal state of the Jews, just like some Polish extremists have suggested. That would become reality. All right, enough said. Let us put an end to this part. Poland owes Jews absolutely nothing. This is all a fraud, a farce, and extortion, and should be called. Norman Finkelstein said finally the Holocaust industry should come to an end, but the politicians won't end it. They support it or they look the other way. Media too, they should call the Jews on their false claims, but they don't. They support the Jews. So millions for defense, but not a cent for tribute. That's what the Holocaust industry wants, tribute. You're not owed a penny from Poland, but you're trying to extract tribute. Okay, this concludes my presentation. One more time, say it loud. Millions for defense, but not a cent for tribute. Polska siła, Polish power.
Okay, Jan, as we come to a close on our webinar, we at POSSE EDU thank you for your interest in each of our webinars. And Jan, we thank you for sharing with us these important facts about how the Holocaust industry has become an outright extortion racket and how it employs various deceitful schemes to persuade the U.S. and international community that Poland is obligated to pay reparations to Israel for crimes committed by the German Third Reich. And with that, we thank our viewers for your interest, and we bid you all dobranoc and good night.